Good morning again. It's nice to be back. As some of you know, I was up in Portland last weekend for my 51st grade school reunion. And I'd never heard of a grade school reunion before, and most people I've talked to haven't heard of a grade school reunion, but they did a 50th the year before and had so much fun, they said, let's do it again. And the year before I was doing a Nourishing Our Community event at our house, and so I said, well, if you do it again, I'll come. So it's been on my calendar since about September when they set the date to go up there. So Cynthia's daughters recently moved to Portland, and both my daughters happened to be, well, one lives there and the other one was visiting, so I got time with the grandson, and it was really nice. So Cynthia got to meet my cousin, who was like my older brother growing up, and as she listened to his slightly caustic tone, she said, oh, this is a family thing, isn't it? It's not just you. So it was kind of interesting to watch that pattern unfold. So I had a great time. Portland was 98 degrees, so they were all complaining how hot it was. I was grateful that it was about 10 to 12 degrees cooler than here, and so it was a great experience. So today we're going to talk about how generous people see the world. How generous people see the world. And this ties into, of course, our year-long theme of looking at ideas for creating a world that works for all. That's the theme that well over 100 religious science churches are working on this year. And so most of us are working on this particular topic today, how generous people see the world. And there's a part of what we call the Global Heart Vision says we see a world in which resources are valued, cared for, and grown, and where there is generous and continuous sharing of these resources. I was just talking with a gentleman right over there earlier about that idea of generosity. And generosity is connection. We were talking about that we have a disconnect problem. Most of our problems in our culture and our society stem from disconnection problems. I could say most of our internal problems stem from a disconnect with spirit, problems. And so if we can have that connection, that sense of connection. And so generosity, some of the synonyms for generosity are big-hearted, open-handed, unselfish. Some of the antonyms, just so you kind of get a flavor for this, are tight-fisted, miserly, and mean. And so we've all known kind of both those, right? And I love this idea of big-hearted, open-handed. When we're in a space of generosity, we're kind of relaxed, and we're open, and we're letting a flow happen, right? And so it's being in that space. It's living in that sense of plenty, that there is enough for all. There's enough for me, and I don't have to operate out of fear. And so we have that open-heartedness, that big-heartedness. So there's three qualities of generous people that I wanted to look at today. Some of this material comes from an online article by a gentleman named Joshua Becker. And the first aspect of generous people is that they recognize that the resource pie is not finite. The resource pie is not finite. That means it's not limited. The mindset of competition, Joshua says, that my resources only grow when someone else's shrinks, is based on a faulty premise. It assumes there's a finite-sized pie, and if someone else enjoys success, my opportunity shrinks. But quite frankly, this thinking is incorrect. The pie of resources is not finite. It continues to grow as society benefits from others' success. So as I'm successful, I create more room for other people to be successful. As I am happy, I create more room for other people to be happy. If I give away love, do I have less love? No. I can give away love and still have all the love, and sometimes even then receive back more, right? It kind of works that way. If we're in that place of generosity, we live in a sense of plenty. We live in that sense. And so when we're in alignment, when we're connected with that universe, when we're connected with our spirit, with our infinite presence, whatever name you give that, we start to realize that it's a whole, and a whole can't be diminished. You can't take part of the whole and send it out of the whole and have less of the whole, because it's a whole, right? It's a unified whole. It can't be diminished. Physicists tell us that energy is never lost. Energy is never lost. It just transforms. It turns into different forms, but it's never lost. There is an always infinite presence of energy in the universe, never lost, just changes forms. I like to say that energy, in my mind, equals love. We talk about that God is, that infinite presence, whatever it is love. It is love. We've talked about this, and I've talked about this, I know a lot, that wonderful phrase from the New Thought writer Emily Cady, that God is not a being that is loving, God is love itself. God is love, and love can't be diminished. And the thing is that everything there is love in form. Breathe that in for a moment. Everything that is some form of love. The chair you're sitting on, the clothes you're wearing, and you yourself are love in form. All of us. Everything. Your house, your car, your money, your job, your spouse, your dog. All of it is love in form. Can we diminish love? So all forms are love and energy and form. And when we're being generous, we're simply sharing that flow of love. We're in that flow and we're sharing it. We're letting it just move through us. The second quality of generous people is that they know that generosity leads to greater happiness. See, when I'm generous, I feel happier. The person who receives my generosity feels happier, right? And that raises the whole happiness level of the planet. Because you've now got two happier people, right? And that person is more likely, and I'm more likely to repeat the generosity experience, and we go out and raise the level some more. Generosity leads to greater happiness. What makes you happy? Cynthia and I were listening to a person speaking on the internet the other day. What makes you happy? And what we decided was, it's not the stuff. Sure, we like money, and we like cars, and we like good food, and we like, all that stuff. But it's not the stuff that really makes us happy. What makes us happy is when we are expressing our love, when we are expressing our authentic self, when we are truly being who we came here to be. We're happy. You've been in places where you don't care about the time, you don't care about the money, you don't care about anything. You're doing what you absolutely love, being who you absolutely love to be. And that's just that flow of energy, that flow of generosity. We're in that infinite flow, and we're not blocking it. We've all had that experience at some time in our lives. And so that's the second part of it, is that generosity leads to greater happiness. We keep on playing in the flow. And then the third thing is that they believe that even changing one life is worthwhile. Changing even one life is worthwhile. Joshua says that generous people are quick to admit the world's problems will never be solved by one person, and perhaps never completely solved even in the future. But perfection does not slow them. To them, changing even one life within their sphere of influence is reward enough, and it is a worthwhile endeavor to be sought. I look at that, and when I think of that, I think of this idea, the Hindu idea of Indra's net, where we explored this earlier this year, where we are all completely interconnected. In the Hindu idea of Indra, who's one of the deities in Hinduism, her net, at the junction of each interconnected little web, is a jewel. Each of us is the jewel. Each of us is a jewel in this net. And whatever we do, it interconnects and it flows out through the net and connects us all. So if I help one person have a better life, just one person, it flows out through the whole of the net. And it lifts all of us in consciousness. And that's that flow of generosity. And we never know the long-term effect of our actions. We never know how our generosity is going to be received. When I was at my grade school reunion, I had a woman who came up to me, and my mother was the librarian at the grade school that I went to. And some of you who know me know that my mom and I didn't have the greatest relationship. But when she was at school being a librarian, she was in her joy. She was doing what she loved. And it was her delight to help kids find new books to read, new books to explore. And she got to know a lot of the kids and knew what their reading style, what their reading interests were, and would point them down the road to other books that were like that and help them to expand and explore. And I met this lady, and afterwards, actually, a second person came up to me and told me a similar story, but that she was so inspired by my mother that she went into library sciences in college and studied library sciences. And she said while she didn't pursue it as a career, she still today, at the age of 65, volunteers in a library because of the inspiration of my mother, a seed that was sown back then. Okay? We never know. And of course, I don't know then what seeds this woman has sown out into other young people. Okay? We never know the actions we take and our generosity and what they're going to do and how it affects other people. When we live generously, we're sowing seeds. We're freely sowing seeds. There's that wonderful parable in the Bible of the sower of the seeds. And the sower of the seeds doesn't sit there and go, I don't know if I want to give these seeds to that place or not. The sower of the seeds just sows the seeds. That's one of the things with being generous is we don't get attached to the outcome. We don't get attached to what has happened. We recognize that ours is just simply to sow the seeds that are whose to sow? Ours to sow. Our own, right? I don't have to sow Sue's seeds. I don't know how to do yoga. Maybe someday I'll learn, but I don't know how to do yoga. But that's the seed that she sows, and I know from conversations with lots of people here that they love that seed. Okay, each of us has our own. I'm looking at our wonderful two, Shirley and Sherry up here, who take care of our infants during the second service out in the children's cottage, and they sow these wonderful seeds of love so early in these beautiful beings' lives. Those aren't my seeds necessarily, because my seed is being here talking while they're holding babies, right? And so, can we sow our seeds, whatever is ours, to sow generously without attachment to the outcome? So I want those three qualities again. First of all, we recognize the pie is not finite. We're not working with a finite pie. We're working with an infinite pie. I like that idea. Infinite pie. Apple. No, blackberry. Marionberry. Probably all those choices. Infinite chocolate cake. You knew I would go there. Last night I did our Nourishing Our Community event, our Taste of India, and I know Christine was there and several other people, Cynthia of course, and we had this wonderful Indian feast, but at the end of it, I don't care for Indian desserts that much, so we had a nice big double layer of chocolate cake, so. And nobody said, hey, this isn't really authentic. They all gobbled it up and said, this is really good. So, but the pie is not limited. The pie that we're working from, the resources we're working from are not limited. We may not be able to see past our own view of it, but that doesn't mean that there's not something past there, right? See, we only have a certain view of the horizon, but there's more past the horizon that we can see, right? And so there's resources past where we can see. Are we willing to play with that? The second quality then is the idea of generosity, of sowing our seeds. That generosity leads to a greater happiness. That we become happier as we become more generous. And that other people become happier as they become more generous. And then the third one finally is the belief and the understanding that everything we do when we're being generous, the lives we change, changing even one life is worthwhile. Changing even one life is worthwhile. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the idea, because what blocks our flow of generosity? Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the idea that we have knots in our consciousness. And those knots are there from hurts and pains and fears and anger that we have experienced over the years. And that as we experience more of those, it creates more and more internal formations that grow within us. Our mind has an experience and it gathers evidence to support that experience. So if I have an early experience, let's say, of abandonment, I will re-experience that abandonment, and my idea of people will abandon me will grow and grow and grow in my life. Now, there'll be plenty of people over here who will never abandon me, but I won't see those. I'll be gathering evidence for this right here, because this is what my belief system says is really happening until I start to take that formation down. If I believe that there's not enough in the world, even if there's all this evidence over here, there's plenty in the world, if I believe it, then I'm going to be operating from that. One of the ways that we get that is, by the way, criticism. One of the best ways to stop generosity in another person is to start criticizing them. I recently noticed a friend of mine had posted on Facebook that George Lucas had donated a portion of his land. He has a big expanse of land in Marin County, and he devoted a portion of that land was building low-income housing on that land. I thought, that's really wonderful, that's great. You should have seen the posts. Oh, that's not going to do anything, that's not going to help anybody, and these people are going to do this. It's like, here's a person just being generous. And these little small-minded people are going, okay? That's a way to stop generosity in another person. Don't practice it. It's also a way to stop generosity within ourselves. That's self-criticism. So we can take these internal formations and start to dissolve them. We want to undo those knots. And because those knots block the flow of universal energy through us. Think of your consciousness as, originally being just this beautiful pipe that, like I know Sue works in cardiac. And so you have a wonderful artery that's designed to flow the blood through it. And then if you're like me, you keep on eating unhealthy stuff. And after a while, the artery builds up with plaque and stuff, these internal formations. And then, pretty soon you have to roto-rooter it out, or do something to clear that up. And so these internal formations within us from our hurts and our pains and that and our anger over the years can start to block this flow and cut it down and cut it down. Now the flow still wants to come through. And the amount of flow is still there. It's still just the same. Can we let it through? And so we want to take a look at that. So generosity is simply being openly in the flow that's already happening of the universe. This infinite flow is already happening. When we're in that flow, giving and receiving is easy. It's just a beautiful flow. It's a beautiful dance that goes in. It's the in-breath and the out-breath easily done when we're in that flow. We don't worry. We don't carry any of that stuff. Worry is basically a fear-based belief that it's not going to work out. When we know that we're in the flow, we don't live in worry. We don't live in fear. We can start to, Thich Nhat Hanh tells us that we can start to release these knots by mindfully loving them. Most of us, want to go in there and roto-rooter or take a hammer and try and knock them down. But he says, no, mindfulness, first of all, just recognizes it. And we mindfully love these formations. We mindfully love them. And that, because the formations are a lack of love. And so if we bring love into this place of hurt, if we bring love into this place of fear, if we bring love into this place of anger, we start to dissolve them because they can't stay in that. So he has a wonderful practice, meditation practice, where he says, breathing in, I know that fear has manifested in me. Breathing out, I smile towards my fear. Breathing in, I know that fear has manifested in me. Breathing out, I smile towards my fear. Let's practice that 3 times, okay? So think about something, a place in your life where, in your own mind, in your own inner being, where you might feel a little bit of block. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's anger, maybe it's hurt. And just be aware of that for a moment. And so let us just mindfully breathe together. Breathing in, I know that fear has manifested in me. Breathing out, I smile towards my fear. Breathing in, I know that fear has manifested within me. Breathing out, I smile towards my fear. One more time. Breathing in, I know that fear has manifested in me. Breathing out, I smile towards my fear. I was doing this practice the other day over something, and I noticed that as I started to smile towards it, as I started to hold it in that consciousness, it started to dissipate. It became smaller. See, oftentimes our fears, our hurts, and our angers seem very big in our consciousness, in our field of view. We talked about having that field of view. Can I see the infinite resources? And if I've got this stuff blocking my view, no, I can't. I can see less and less. But after a while, I start to rise up and become the full, great being that I am. And I start to change the perspective of where this fits within my life. And it's not even necessary that it becomes smaller. It's that I become remembering that I am larger. I become more mindful that I am bigger than this. Did it happen? Yes, it happened. But it's not my whole life. So I invite you this week to practice that practice. Breathing in, I know that whatever it is has manifested in my life. Breathing out, I smile towards it. I smile towards it. Nothing else. Don't have to do anything more. Play with that. The other practice I want to talk about is for feeling generosity, is to feel generosity in your body. In your body. So generosity is an ease, it's an abundance. The dictionary definition of generosity talks about freely giving or sharing, providing more than the normal or needed amount. It gives the idea of a generous awning on a building. And a generous awning is not just a little tiny bit that's there, it expands out and over, right? So generous is more than we need to be. So I want to invite you, if you're willing to stand up for a moment. We're going to have a feeling, a cellular experience of generosity. So I just want you to breathe in and out and just notice, what would your body feel like if you were feeling completely generous? If you absolutely knew that you were resourced in every single way with everything you needed, and you could just be generous, and just take a moment to experience that. Take a moment to express that. Let your body move in a generous way. Notice the cells of your body and let each one kind of open up and feel at the cellular level just a little bit more generous, a little bit more in that flow. The breathing in, the breathing out, the loving in and out, the flow. Perhaps let your arms expand, let your body move to experience that. The giving and receiving of universal energy. Breathing in, breathing out. Anchor this experience in your body. What does my body feel like when I'm living in generosity? More relaxed, more joyful, more connected to the ground, to the earth, more present. Just let yourself feel that for another moment. And when you're ready, go ahead and have a seat. Retaining that generosity as you sit. So this week I invite us to have 3 spiritual practices beyond the breathing practice. The first one is to practice generosity. Just practice it. Practice generosity. Look in your life at where you can practice generosity more fully. Where can you freely give more than is expected? With anything, with something in your life. And pay attention to how you think and feel. Do I have any beliefs being triggered as I think about being generous? Oh, I don't have enough. Oh, I can't make a difference. Oh, who am I? Just notice that if any of those feelings are being triggered, and if they are, just breathe and smile at them. And practice generosity. The second practice then is to just observe generosity at work in nature. Observe generosity at work around you. You know, nature is, by its nature, generous. It doesn't just sit there and say, well, I'll just create one tree or one little grain of sand on the beach or one little star in the sky. Right? It's generous, it's expansive, it's over the top. Okay? Just notice it, pay attention to it, just watch it in nature, watch it happening. And the third, continue to release any mental and physical knots. Let that practice, that breathing in, breathing out practice, let yourself engage in that. Let your body deepen in its cellular experience of generosity. Wake up every morning and go, just, whatever that is for you. How does my body feel generous today? Can I wake up in the morning and the first thing out of bed to go, I'm going to start off by feeling generous. A lot of us wake up and go, where's my cup of coffee? Right? Or what's the bills that I have to pay, or what's on my to-do list today, or whatever. Right? What if we woke up and said the very first thing, how can I be generous today? How can I remember what that feels like? And I'm going to start off with my body feeling generous. Okay? So that's your 3 spiritual practices I invite you to play with this week. Number 1, just practice generosity. Number 2 is observe it at work in nature. And number 3 is to continue to release any mental and physical knots that you may have. Are you willing to play with that? Yeah. I'm going to close with a story, actually. It's about the Dead Sea. Most of you are familiar with the Dead Sea over in the Palestine Peninsula. So the Dead Sea normally has a salinity of about 35 to 39%, and not a whole lot grows in that, as you can probably imagine, right? Back in 1980, the Dead Sea received an unusual amount of rainfall, a whole lot of rainfall, and it lowered the salinity level by 5%, down to 30%. And it was sufficient to allow algae and then other forms of bacteria of life to grow, to start growing where they hadn't before. And it actually turned the sea that is normally this dark blue into red, because the bacteria that were activated by the algae. Okay. And all it took was a 5% change. Just a 5% change in salinity. We oftentimes think that we have to make a huge change in our consciousness, in our lives, in the world. Nature tells us it doesn't take that much. What if I could just be 5% more generous each day of my life? What if I could just be 5% more loving and caring towards people? 5%. Can we do 5%? Doesn't mean I have to completely give up everything, right? Just how can I be 5% more? How can I give 5% more love today? How can I just be more generous in my thinking towards other people today? 5% more. By the way, since 1981, there has been no extra rainfall, and all the algae died off, and all the bacteria died off, and it's back to being what, the Dead Sea again, is it, for a lot of years. What I want to say out of that is, we have to keep the practice up. It's not something you can just do for a short time and it transforms in there and then I'm done. It's not a checkoff. Well, I was generous, okay. I spent a week being generous, I'm done. I'm now a more generous person. No, we have to keep it up. It's one of the reasons I know Reverend Mary last week talked about taking classes and doing things and engaging with retreats or some sort of a practice, something that stimulates us and keeps us in that practice. And so we need to continue to do some sort of a practice to keep ourselves being generous, to keep ourselves in that flow consciously. And then that 5% becomes more easy to sustain and becomes more natural, and then we create a whole shift. So I want to invite you to, this week, play with just being 5% more generous. Let's move into prayer. So I recognize that there is this infinite abundance. Whether we call it God, whether we call it the Tao, whether we call it Spirit, whether we call it the One Mind, whatever name we give it, there's this one infinite energy, infinite love, infinite expressing and givingness of itself. That is the nature. It's the love, beauty, intelligence, power of this universe. And because it is all there is, we have to be one of it. We are immersed in it. We are expressions of that one. We are love. We are beauty. We are intelligence, and we are power. This is the truth of who we are. And we are emanations and ongoing expressions of the infinite. And so I speak my word that we play that role in the infinite, that true nature of who we are, that we are here to express the uniqueness that each of us is generously, fully, allowing ourselves to just be who we are. We let go of our own self-criticism and our own withholding. We let go of criticism of others, and we create an atmosphere, an opening within ourselves for the generous flow of the divine energy in all the various aspects of our lives, in all the various ways within our lives. We just simply let ourselves be in the flow that is already happening and allow it to move through us as unrestricted as we can. We are greater than all the stuff we've ever faced. And so we know this. There is that aspect within us which already knows this is true. And so I know that this is what is growing within us. Even at just a 5% rate, it will make a significant difference, and we allow it to do so. We say yes to this flow. We say yes to this natural generosity that we truly are, which is just simply that flow of the universe. And for this, and for each person who says yes and is this opening to the generosity of the universe, I am ever so grateful, because I know that it lifts all of us. All of us. And I'm grateful for the flow of Spirit that is already present and moving through each of us. As I simply release this word with a beautiful deep breath into what we call the law, the process of making it so, of bringing it into form and expression in our lives, knowing that it is already done in Spirit's mind, it is now established in our minds as so, we, in agreement with it, say yes and affirm that by saying together, and so it is.